Well, hello and welcome to the Creating Connections podcast, where I bring voices and perspectives from people who are making a difference for children's learning and development. I'm Rachel Stewart, and I'm passionate about connecting with people to share experiences and learn from each other how we can best support children to thrive. As founder and director of Practically Learning, I specialise in developing the capacity of parents and educators through personal development coaching and professional learning programs to build trust to engage in effective partnerships. I'm endlessly curious about what is happening in our world today, especially in our schools and in private practice, with those who are just as passionate about supporting children to thrive as I am. Through this platform, my mission is to share good news stories and strategies for what is working in how to improve the lives of children in our world today and for the future. In this series of the podcast, we're exploring different people, support networks, and organisations who are able to provide a circle of support for you as parents as you navigate your way through the school journey with your children. You will learn from a diverse range of people how they can support you to guide your children to reach their fullest potential as a unique and whole person. Today, I'm introducing you to Maddie Graham. Maddie is a vibrant and passionate young woman who is striving to make a difference for children in education with a focus on their well-being and navigating life's challenges. She leads a community development organisation called Changing the Conversation that empowers individuals and fosters social justice through education, engagement, and behaviour change. Her business has recently been nominated for the Young Achiever Awards in the category of Super Connecting Communities Award. Maddie delivers social and emotional learning workshops in schools and specialises in creating and executing campaigns that raise awareness, spark dialogue, and inspire action on important issues such as gender equality, wellbeing, and self-confidence. In this interview, we will explore a variety of topics that are of significance to young people and how we need to change the conversation to support them in navigating these to live fuller, happier lives. So I'd like you to make welcome Maddie Graham to the podcast today.
So I thought of you the other day because of what we talked about in our last chat, and I was like, oh, it's interesting kind of putting all the pieces together and listening to experiences and how that, yeah, I thought about you. So
well, that's lovely that you thought of me. Yes, I think I really enjoyed our conversation, and I just love your passion, and that's why I'm so excited about our conversation today. Because I think we're going to be talking about some pretty interesting topics, but really important topics as well,
yes.
And topics that are close to both our hearts. And I'm sure that both of us have experienced different things in our lives that have brought us to this line of work or this area of work, but also why we've actually met.
Absolutely.
There is a reason for everything. And
absolutely, I love it. I'm excited.
yeah, so I think I've got a series of questions for you, but I love it I love the organic process of podcast interviews and just keeping it conversational. So wherever it's supposed to go, we will go.
Yeah, I love it.
Whatever comes up for us will happen. So I'd like to welcome you to my Creating Connections podcast, and I'm really excited to be exploring your background, but also the work that you're doing in schools and your passion for children's wellbeing, mental health and wellbeing. So I guess for every interview, I start with what your backstory is and how you actually came to discover your purpose. Was there a point in your life where you were challenged with your mental health and wellbeing that brought you into this line of work, or was there experiences that you have seen other people go through that has given you a very high sense of social justice? We'll start there.
Great question. I think there's been a few experiences. So when I was in year 7, my dad had an accident, and my brother and I found him unconscious. And basically from there, I remember, I was already in a new high school. I was, navigating all this new transition. And I remember I knew at that point, I knew how to seek help. So I went to the assistant principal at the time, and I told her what happened. And I remember I was dismissed. The response I essentially got was, well, what do you want? okay, what do you want? And I remember from there that I started to actually develop probably more behavioral issues. I never was one personally that had all of these, I didn't kind of fall into the system of, doing crimes or anything like that, or ending up in hospital. I was actually someone that flew under the radar. And I think that was because a lot of when we're kind of looking at this from a development perspective, it's very easy to disassociate and just carry on with life. So that was my experience. And I remember that I had a pretty good high school life. Like, I wasn't someone that was experiencing bullying. I wasn't someone that was experiencing more so much of the social issues that a lot of individuals experience. And I think if I was someone that experienced that, I think that my life outcomes would have been really different. I got invited to all the parties. I was probably engaging in a lot of partying behavior, which in my opinion was risk-taking behavior. And I remember how that probably did impact my, attendance in school. It probably impacted what my view of school was, and just the entire engagement of that. And then, so I always was someone that, I talked about it when I moved into my job, when I was a personal trainer, and I always said, oh, I want to take things into schools. I want to take things into schools. And then I remember that then I did a school workshop, and it was about, like, it was very health promotion, base of like managing, stress coming up to exams. And it was just when I was dipping my toes into psych, and kind of like going down that path. And I remember that I went to this school, and I'm from a good socioeconomic area. I would say that my upbringing has been in a bit of a bubble. And I went to this school, and I learned that so many of the girls that were in this cohort had come into Australia on a boat, and they didn't even know, like, they would come without their parents. They didn't know what they were coming into. And they had experienced child sexual abuse. They had experienced not knowing when they're going to eat next. They had experienced not knowing where they were going to live. And I think that was probably my turning point for me, that I found that there was this large connection of, we can be out here talking about mental health and mental well-being, but when we're looking at it from a lens of so many of these other factors surrounding adverse childhood experiences and, what young people are being exposed to at such a young age, it was very spoken about in this situation. It was very normalized. And to me, it was so, I remember, like, because I had to go and speak to the teacher about it. I had to go and disclose what had been disclosed to me. And I remember that there was this, like, I just knew, I was like, if this is still close to, where I'm from, imagine what's happening all across Australia. So that was when I started to learn a little bit more about adverse childhood experiences, and looking at the role of, like, if things are not being addressed, or there is not enough support, especially for the kids that are flying under the radar, they may not be presenting to teachers or principals with, oh, this is what's happened. They may not disclose anything, but they might be having other underlying behavioral issues. It was never a conversation when I was in school about the situation that happened with my dad, but I'd be pulled into the principal's office, or I would be skipping school, and my year coordinator would say, okay, if you are not going to have your attendance up, we're going to have a bit of a problem. I wanted to leave school. Like, there was all these other things that had been developed. Like, I developed, a disordered eating pattern because there was so much more of that control and the stability that I could see at that time. And so I think that nothing was ever addressed because there's so many kids that may not talk about it. They may not know how to talk about it, and that there's a lot of shame. And I think that when we're looking at the exposure of a certain amount of adverse childhood experiences, that it connects to so many larger issues that that they potentially could fall into later on in life. And there has been so many studies and research that has been done by Griffith University, specifically looking into the Criminology Institute, of looking at adverse childhood experiences and child sex offenders and perpetrators of crime, and looking at the cycle of this. And so I feel like it's been my personal experience and what I have, that probably laid a bit of a foundation for this, because I'm like, yeah, I understand it. But I also think that there is an amplified impact because my impact is in a bubble. I didn't have to wonder when I was going to eat it next. I never had to wonder where I was going to sleep at night. And so even though I have experienced some adverse childhood experience, I think that there is so much more, and we need, and I guess my perspective of is that I can see how all the dots connect.
Yeah. And yeah, I think you and I probably come from a similar background. And I would say that I was the same, under the radar. And there was not a lot of support, or you didn't know as a kid who to actually speak to, because I experienced quite a lot of trauma as a kid as well, but I didn't realize how that would impact the rest of my life and how I viewed myself and how I behaved. And I would say the same thing. I probably hid my pain through doing other things and, you know, trying to explore who I was, I suppose, but in unhealthy ways, and, struggled with, diet, weight, all those different things. And it can be, I suppose, just passed off as normal teenage behavior and rebellion and all those sorts of things. But there are always underlying issues as to why people behave a certain way. And I suppose that's what led you into discovering the science of behavior. And I'm fascinated by it as well, and understanding how our brain works and how trauma does impact our brain. And that sort of led me into becoming a coach as well, to transform people's I suppose the trauma that they have experienced and adverse experiences. It doesn't necessarily have to be trauma, but it could be experiences that you don't know actually how to deal with or how to manage. And the amount of things that come up for you as a person, and I suppose I'm a lot older than you, so I've gone through a lot of different experiences, and you just are not prepared for them, but they are always constantly testing you as a human and what you're capable of. But as you move through them, you become stronger, but you need to be able to have the skills to be able to do that, and the resilience skills. And often I think there's a lot of people who have been through adverse experiences or trauma who have got that resilience. Would you say that a lot of the people you've come across who have managed to get through life, living with trauma and overcoming the sadness and the I suppose, in a lot of ways, discovering themselves and who they are beyond the trauma, would you say that they are the ones who are leading the way in helping others? And how is that? How do you think that is affecting your work in terms of connecting with the right people and being able to support young people with the different things that are happening in their world at the moment?
Mm-hmm. I think that what I've found is a lot of the time I see in like pop psychology is that, resilience is built off all these traumatic events. And I think the one thing that I've learned from this experience and speaking to people and connecting with people is that no, you didn't have to go through that traumatic event to learn what resilience is. And I think that when I'm speaking to people who are, connected to a specific area of research or change in regards to legislation, I think all of it is that there is some type of, unfortunately, personal experience. This is not for everyone, but I've found that a lot of the people that I meet, and I meet these people through when I went to the Global Women in Leadership Summit, when I've been to, I went to a walk with Full Stop Australia for domestic violence. There's been fundraising events where it's all got to do with, some type of well-being, or like a larger social issue. And unfortunately, there is some type of, I guess the people that I've met anyways, there's some type of underlying personal experience. And I think that when they're, leading the way, you can hear the passion in their movement, because it is, and this is probably more so in the research that I look into. So I look so much into, these types of adverse experiences. So when I'm looking at, or I'm having chats with, one of my friends, he's aiming to make a legislation change in Canberra. We're talking about, child sexual abuse, and it is something that is it is a heavy topic. It is, and I think that when we're having these conversations, there is somehow a personal connection as to what it is. I can see it from a lens of the impact of adverse childhood experiences and, and these outcomes on individuals' lives later on, and their, interaction with, the criminal justice system, or mental health, or substance abuse, or eating disorders, anything like that. And so when he's talking about this stuff, he's looking at it from what's occurring in, court hearings, or what's this sentencing. And so I feel like the people that are leading the way, even though it may not be on, through the exact same lens, there is some type of overarching connection which drives a lot of, I guess, the fierceness, and the determination, because it can get really heavy.
Yeah. And it's, I suppose, something that people have shied away from talking about in the past, but there are a lot of voices now that are speaking up, and a lot of female voices particularly, which is really important, because a lot of these issues have impacted women and girls. And I feel like we're in a changing space at the moment where there are a lot more female voices that are being heard, and male voices as well, who are supporting that female voice, which I think is really important because they see the injustices as well. And yeah, I just want to take you back to when you're at school and you approached the deputy principal
Mm-hmm.
to seek help. And I wonder what the conversation is at the moment in terms of the safety of schools. And I know a lot of schools have changed the way they do things now, and they are providing wellbeing support for students, and a lot of schools have wellbeing teams now where the students can go and share what's happening with them, and they have circle time and all different programs that are implemented in schools now. What is it about the conversation that needs to change now that's still not happening?
This is really interesting. Great question. So mind you, when I went to this and I had this conversation with my deputy principal, this was 14 years ago. So I was in year 7 in 2010. And I think at the time, I think that a lot of, teachers and principals weren't equipped. There wasn't enough of the conversation about understanding a trauma-informed approach, and having these conversations. So I always am aware of that in my own personal experience. I think that if someone feels a little bit more equipped and understands how to approach it, I feel like then the individual will be met with more of that supportive, and understanding approach to guide them in the right direction. At the moment, I was recently in an educator support network meeting, down south, and we're seeing that there's a little bit more of a systematic issue that's occurring. A lot of schools have definitely, I would say all of them, all schools have brought on some type of wellbeing approach. So we can see this through the positive learning. There's a positive behavior learning approach that a lot of schools engage in. There's a lot of programs, similar to mine, that really kind of emphasize on either social emotional learning, cyber safety. We've got like, comprehensive sex education. Like there is a lot more of that, and a lot of schools are getting inquiries. I think that in regards to it is being able to look at a comprehensive approach. And this comprehensive approach is ensuring that we can support and continue the conversation outside of school premises. So we need to know, how can we support children? How do we actually build on parent engagement? And how do we support the teachers so that we can have a comprehensive approach that we look at the entirety of that? There is still, unfortunately, a gap that is missing, and that's actually beyond that. And this is also looking at access to CAMS, which is in New South Wales, is to Child and Adolescent Mental Health Service. So this is for children and adolescents that are presenting with behavior that require a lot more support. And that's what I find at the moment a lot of schools are struggling with, is being able to find higher interventions and higher support. So I feel like in regards to more so much of the conversation, I think that it's looking at it from a lens of thinking, okay, how can we take care of all of this and being able to create a change long term, so long lasting impact. But it's being able to, again, engage the children, making sure that the teachers are engaged, and also ensuring that we can engage the parents, because if we're only engaging one side of it, we don't know what else is happening over here. And there's something happening over here can specifically, it may even just counteract what's going on over here. Additionally, I've also, after doing a little bit more research, I'm also very aware that looking at program effectiveness is extremely important for schools. A lot of schools, in regards to even like principals and school leaders, they really have to be conscious of the decision that they make when engaging a program, specifically because at what point is a program or potentially some type of engagement, what if that actually accelerates and amplifies the problem?
Yeah.
So, and it's really, and I think the more that I, am engaging with speaking to people that are beyond principals, like I'm speaking to people that know all the wellbeing coordinators and know all the principals, like, it's being able to ensure that there is safety when engaging with these extracurricular perspectives, because you do not know. Again, you might have someone that's flying under the radar and you don't know if you're going to be coming into contact with them. So I think that that's what I'm seeing from the conversations I'm having with what's really going on.
Yeah. And yeah, because you are tackling a lot of different topics that are very deep and personal, and experiences that people have had that they may not have shared with anyone because there's shame, or because they just don't know who to turn to, or they're trying to figure it out themselves. And yeah, I'm just wondering, what sort of engagement are you seeing at the moment with schools between home and school, and how many schools are seeing the value of engaging with parents around their children's well-being? Because we know as parents that most of the issues that come home are not necessarily their academic challenges, it's their social and emotional challenges with friendships and self-image, self-belief, and all of those different things that parents need to be working on with their kids, but may not have the resources or the knowledge or understanding of how to do that. So engagement with parents by the school in what they're teaching kids is really essential, but we're still not seeing a lot of that from schools. Are you seeing an increase or a hesitance to do that in the schools
So
that you're working
I'm seeing that the schools want the parent engagement, but the barrier is actually getting the parents engaged.
with? Yeah.
So when I've spoken to school principals, they are 10 out of 10. They're wanting parental engagement. They are aware of the importance of a comprehensive approach. They're all over it. The issue is that it's actually having the parents being engaged in the program or whatever it might be, that like the workshop, whatever it is. I recently put forward something in a Facebook group, speaking to parents and understanding, like, putting some information out there to understand what issues that they're seeing with their with their children aged 8 to 14. And it's exactly like what you said. What the parents told me is exactly the same issues as what the principals are telling me. And so again, it comes back into again, the self-esteem, the social anxiety, struggling to make friends, body image. There is a lot of, we're seeing it, and it continues, it goes on and on. Parents are thinking, what do I do? How do I want to do it. I want to help. I want to do this, but how?
Yeah.
And I think that's where we're kind of looking at in regards to schools are wanting parent engagement. They are wanting that because they are like, okay, we want the best thing for our kids, like for all the students. Because if one minor problem isn't fixed or addressed, then it turns into a bigger issue later. And the principals or teachers, they don't have time to be not dealing with things as they pop up. They have enough on their plate, and they are wanting the best for the students' well-being. And so it's being able to engage that. So I think it's so much more really understanding what the parents are concerned about, and really working with the parents to develop something that is effective and that it actually solves the issue. Because even though I see trends, in different areas, like I'm doing a community workshop, further out from where I live. And what they need is completely different to what is needed in a different socioeconomic area. And so the principals are like, great, we know what we need. We know that we are dealing with this. These are the words that are consistently coming up, but parents sometimes don't show up because they've got too much on their plate. So I think that there is an issue when it comes to parent engagement. I believe in parent engagement and overall engaging everyone that's involved in student well-being. And schools are onto it, but I think that where it is getting the parents over the line to actually engage in something.
What do you think that is preventing parents from engaging at the moment? Is it because there are things that are happening in their own lives that they don't want to be exposed, or is it that parents need support themselves to manage everything that's going on with them as well?
Look, I feel like it could be a range because I could be completely honest, I haven't interviewed parents of these specific, schools to say what is a barrier for you? Because I haven't gotten that far yet. But I would assume that it could be a range of options. It could be the fact that potentially there's cost of living. So it could be that they don't have time to be putting their, if the kids are in after school care, potentially they can't afford to do that. They're just trying to make ends meet. Things are kind of too hectic at the moment. They could be dealing with their own stuff. I feel like there's so many. I feel like there could be so many factors that could go into it. I feel like having one main reason, I feel like can get back to you after I've done a couple of surveys. But
Yeah.
I think that overall it could just be that there is so much on their plate right now that just, sitting down for XYZ, workshop might just not be top of mind at the moment. It could be, I need to get food on the table for the kids. I need to have another job because I need to pay rent. So I think that there is probably at the moment, there's a lot on people's plates and people are just trying to get by. And that is unfortunately more of a systematic issue than it is an individual one.
Yeah, it's just the big social issues at the moment, putting so much pressure on everyone. Do you think that, I guess this is something that's on the top of my mind and probably yours, is that we are not equipped with the skills to be able to manage the pressures of life? And is that the focus that you have in your workshops, to be able to give young people, especially, the unique skills that they need to understand their own mental health and their own ways that they think and how they respond to things. And I guess in my line of work, I talk a lot about how we respond to external influences, but also to our internal dialogue,
Mm-hmm.
because our internal dialogue is at a million miles an hour constantly. And to be able to slow that down and manage it and observe it and how to actually respond to what you're telling yourself is probably the biggest challenge that we have. And that's where it impacts our mental health. Is that what you're teaching in your workshops for young people?
We focus on equipping students with essential life skills. So this, it's very age appropriate. So for kindergartens, it's very much about identifying emotions and identifying who's a safe person to speak to, how to be a friend, how to work together in a team. And then we go all the way up into, looking at discussions of bullying and cyberbullying and cyber safety and social media and body image
The
and all.
list is long,
List is long, but it's
unfortunately.
because they are all connected, and it's important to understand that we have a big influence on our life. And I experienced this when I was in high school because social media was out when I was in year 7. We were all on Facebook. Instagram came out when I was in year 8. So for us, it's very much really understanding that we've got more influences on our well-being. Where are we consuming information? What's the role of social media on friendships and, our self-image, and how is that playing a role in a lot of our behavior? And I do believe that we all say, and you might agree with this, you look at something like this and you're like, oh, I wish that we had have had that in school. Like, I wish I had learned that when I was in school. And I think that's probably the underlying core concept, is that, I understand every single person I speak to, like, oh, I wish I had have had that in school, because we might have a little bit of, work. We might have someone come in that talks about mental health, or we might have someone that comes in, here and there about, like, bullying. But what are the actual foundational skills that are required to actually help with that? If someone is struggling with emotional regulation and social skills, then when they experience bullying or cyberbullying or an adverse life experience, things are going to be very different compared to someone that's able to have the essential social emotional learning skills to be able to handle that and to be able to navigate that. And it's about supporting the parents with that, and it's about supporting the teachers. And so then that way, every single person has essential life skills. And I think that you're going to go into an Australian school and you're going to learn maths. So we also need to think about that when it comes to our general social emotional learning.
Yeah. And of course, we know that our well-being impacts how we learn. Because
Mm-hmm.
if you're not in the right headspace, it's very difficult to learn.
Mm-hmm.
So, what are you seeing are the biggest issues that young people are tackling at the moment? You've mentioned social media and the pressures of self-image, and those sorts of things have been happening for a while, probably since, Instagram and Facebook came into our lives. And I'm a product of pre-social media, and we still had pressures as young people as well to conform to what other people's expectations were of us, particularly our parents
Mm-hmm.
and teachers and peers. But it was different then because we could escape it. We could choose not to engage with people because there weren't as many ways to connect with people online constantly.
Mm-hmm.
So, in terms of what is actually impacting children's mental health at the moment, what are you seeing is the biggest issue?
There's a couple of things, because in different socioeconomic areas, we're seeing different things. So overall, we're seeing that friendships and social skills, like social anxiety, is a massive one. And we're seeing this with the role of, like, we're seeing an influence on social media with that, but we're also seeing these issues with resilience, teamwork, just general social skills after COVID.
Yeah.
These I guess these couple of years where COVID was really impacted that social development, we're seeing this come out now. And so we're seeing that also, and this is again a larger systematic issue, but there are kids that don't know that they're not eating. They don't have any access to food, as well as they don't know where they're going to sleep at night. Again, when I was in the meeting with educators, obviously this has got to do with more of, again, a systematic situation and the current climate with cost of living. But they've got kids that they're being fed Monday and Thursdays by the council organizes something, but there is no security for their essential needs currently at the moment in where kind of like in this specific area. And so we're talking about the barriers for individuals when it comes to what they're dealing with. And because of what's currently going on in the world with cost of living, this is also something that has been I guess it's been interesting and it's been really upsetting, because if these kids are not eating and they don't know where they're going to sleep at night, they're not going to have the capacity to learn about social skills. So we've got, again, the issues around social anxiety, but we also have fundamental human needs that are currently not being met. And that is something that has been, ever since I was in that meeting, we're seeing these issues. So it's, we've got a lot of, there's a lot of anxiety about the future as well because of what's going on in the world. They are seeing what's happening overseas. They are seeing climate change. They are seeing, there's a lot of questions about what's going on. And so it's really hard to, I guess, put my finger on one specific thing, because I think that, like what you were saying, the environment is really playing a big role on this. And that's, again, why when I was in this meeting and we were talking about what are the barriers to kids learning social emotional skills, anything like that, how there's all these other things that are so much bigger. There's so much bigger than a little person like me being like, yes, social emotional learning. Because if these kids, they don't have general housing or food security, then they probably are not going to be engaging in a workshop talking about emotional regulation when they have a hungry belly.
Yeah, and I think it all comes back to feeling safe, doesn't it? And the fact that our world can be completely disrupted by something like the pandemic and completely out of the blue, that really shook a lot of people because in our society, I think I've witnessed a lot more people wanting more certainty and control of their lives. And when they are feeling out of control, there's a lot of fear that's connected to that. And that fear then stems back to how safe we feel. But I feel also, and maybe you're seeing this too, and this is probably what is causing a lot of mental health issues, is that we don't feel safe in our own bodies and our own selves. And that I suppose the narrative of the conversation needs to be more talking about that and really looking at, okay, why don't we feel safe to be ourselves to start with? Because we're constantly being judged or criticized or not living up to expectations. How can we help young people understand that they can feel safe in their own selves and in their own bodies and in their own identity? Because identity seems to be a major challenge as well for a lot of people, questioning who they are, what their gender is, what their preferences are for relationships. And there's so many questions happening, constantly questioning yourself if you're good enough. And is there a way that we can provide? There are ways, I know that there are ways that we can provide that for young people, but is that the conversation we should be having, as well as highlighting all these different issues that stem from that feeling of a lack of safety?
I feel like there's two kind of parts where my brain kind of goes. I think that I think that a lot of what I've kind of, after speaking to a couple of young people and speaking to parents, is that they it's not so much not young people not feeling safe in their body. I think that there is some individuals that could fall into more of that, I guess, discussion of not feeling certain about that part of their identity when they're talking more so much about genders and sexualities. But I think there's a lot of uncertainty at the moment because people are having a normal reaction to what's going on in the world and all of these environmental influences. And that is then, there's a lot of I don't know how to say the word. It's like a lot of people are having this like existence or this crisis around existence because there's so much to really try and process when we're looking at more so much around self-expression and self-image and that the social skill side of things. I think that being able to provide young people an opportunity to express that in a safe way and being able to also help parents navigate how to support their child, and this is just in general, you're going to come across parents that only want their child to be a certain way because they see their child as an extension of themselves. And I think it's really important to just guide parents to be able to step back and allow them to support their child, to build on those skills, to build on expressing who they are. And if they decide to do something that is outside of the norm, based off, again, norms and stereotypes of what you're supposed to be as my child, being able to support them. And if there is, if there is behavior that is harmful or concerning, to seek out professional help, go and, seek out, a psychologist. You can go and do that. So I feel like the conversation is so much more being able to assess and understand what it is that potentially is playing a role in this young person's well-being. Are they currently looking, is it their view of the world? Because sometimes what happens is we can internalize our view and feel like, okay, there's all these things wrong with me. This is what I'm feeling. I'm not feeling good enough. Everyone hates me. Feeling that internalized view of myself. Is it the view of other people? Is it how I view others? Or am I actually viewing the world outside? And how do I fit into that world? And I think that that's really important because when I learn about this in my degree, it really changed a lot of perspective because you're able to then being able to understand what is going to help me navigate this. Because if you've got a young person dealing with their view of themselves, we're looking at self-esteem, emotional regulation, identity and self-development, that side of things. If it's to view with others, we're looking at social relationships, we're looking at social skills, social anxiety, all of that. If we're looking at the view of the world, which is what tends to be coming up a lot, that's a completely different approach. And so it's being able to understand what falls into it and being able to approach it in a supportive way.
Yeah. Wow. That was a great answer. It just brought up a topic that I think is really worth discussing as well, and that is the relationship between parents and their children. And I had a discussion with another person yesterday, actually, about this. And what came up for us in that conversation was around the fear of the closeness or the dynamic of that relationship between parent and child, because it is unique. And each of our children are unique as well. And I've written about it in my book, actually, about being an observant parent rather than trying to control everything that your child does or how they turn out, and really taking a step back and observing them as a person and really tuning into their passions and interests and understanding who they are as a person, completely separate to you, but a combination of you and your partner. And of course, they inherit genetics and all sorts of things, and so that's what makes them so unique as well. And the topic of yeah, that fear of that relationship came up, which I hadn't really thought about before, but I feel that it's something that does need to be shared and talked about because it is it is such a profound experience to have a child.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a feeling that you never have, I don't think, with anyone else in your life. And it's the same with siblings, you have a specific special relationship with siblings, and sometimes it's positive and sometimes you may have your difficulties, but they're all different relationships that we're navigating, and we're not really taught how to have relationships.
Mm-hmm.
We just sort of we're relying on role models. Sometimes we don't have the best role models for relationships. And so then we're struggling to kind of navigate
Mm-hmm.
what that looks like, especially if we've had a difficult relationship with our own parents and then we become parents ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
How do we support parents around really just, I suppose, not putting so much pressure on themselves to be perfect parents, but really going with the flow of parenting
Mm-hmm.
and seeing where the child leads them, but giving them guidance along the way. I suppose that's the message I'm trying to share with parents, is to really just take that time to observe them, listen to your intuition and what that's telling you to do as a parent. And I think that often we forget to trust our own intuition.
Mm-hmm.
And it's usually telling us, the right thing to do, and gives us little messages along the way. But how can we, I suppose, support parents to see that this relationship is kind of temporary? We don't have a lot of time to guide our kids. And yes, we want to do the best job we can, but we also need to be observant and be there when our kids need us as well.
Mm-hmm. I think that's a really good question, because I recently put out something in a Facebook group that actually it's like it's a joint workshop for parents and for daughters. And it's looking at strengthening that bond between parents and daughters and actually sharing activities. And I got such a large response. It was like still getting messages today. And I think what I found was that being able to support parents with the psychoeducation of actually understanding fundamentally of what issues potentially could arise, understanding that. I think that with education comes that confidence to navigate. And so there's kind of that two-side aspect, which is you've got the psychoeducation, so equipping parents with skills of being able to identify, navigate, and support. So if something does come up, or if something is brought up, or if the school contacts the parents, to be able to understand it, to then be able to support. Because I think that a lot of the time, if the child is, or like the adolescent is quite young, and they might have gone through adverse childhood experiences, whatever it might be, they may model something. And if the parent doesn't have the foundational knowledge of potentially what that might be, there could be punishment, there could be shame, there could be avoidance, which is like ignoring the child. And something that is important to understand is that if something does come up, if you have the understanding and the foundational knowledge of what could possibly occur, and then being able to know how to approach the conversation, understanding the developmental age, it could then provide an opportunity to support and guide the child, and understanding why they may have fallen into something, if they are engaging in risk-taking behaviors, if they are engaging in harmful behaviors, if they are engaging in issues with friends or whatever it might be. Now I'm talking very much tier one general discussion here. Being able to understand that and know how to navigate it. We see on the other side, which is a lot more like parents are struggling to keep their child safe from themselves, and they cannot leave their child's side. And that's the issue that we're seeing with access to the child and mental health adolescent service. That's what we're seeing at the moment. And I think that being able to essentially just, number one, give them the psychoeducation of understanding what issues may arise, and secondly, being able to provide opportunities for connection, and giving them tools and resources to be able to facilitate that. I
Yeah.
haven't piloted my program yet, but I think it will be interesting to see what, from the pre-assessment to the post-assessment, I think it'll be very interesting to see what comes back and how this supports, parents and children, because if the child is already dealing with so much at school, being able to be a safe and supportive person, even from an adverse childhood experience, situation, being that one supportive and trusting person can make all the difference. And being able to continue that strong bond and that relationship is important.
Yeah.
Just remaining trustworthy.
Yeah. And of course, as we talk about the partnership between homeschool and the student, because schools can't be responsible for everything. And in a lot of ways, I suppose we are seeing them having to take on that responsibility almost as parent,
Mm-hmm.
to some children who are perhaps not receiving that attention or that, I suppose, that support at home. And it may not be, it's not about blaming parents, but it's more about building the capacity of parents to be able to understand how to navigate all these challenges, because potentially they haven't actually experienced those challenges themselves as young people. So trying to navigate, particularly social media, is a really tricky space for parents, because we do try to set boundaries, but they're constantly broken. Um, there's a lot of different things that our children are exposed to that we've never actually been exposed to ourselves. And I suppose the fear around that for parents is that their children are being influenced by other external sources that are out of their control. And
Mm-hmm.
so trying to navigate that is just such a minefield.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it sounds amazing, the support that you're providing for parents. And yeah, I think that is definitely an area that parents really need. And I know a lot of schools try their best to provide cyber safety and all of those sorts of workshops and things like that. But I feel like it's more the strategies that they need to be
Mm.
able to still have that strong bond with their kids, but still set boundaries as
Mm.
well and stick to them and be consistent. And I suppose that's the hardest part about being a parent, is being consistent.
Oh, absolutely. And like, I've always been someone ever since I was little. My mum would tell me that she'd say, all right, you're going to go, I was like 2. And then she was like, you're going to go sit in that corner. So I would go to the other corner and say, I'm going to stand in this corner. And my mum was like, no, you're going to sit in that corner.
A rebel from a young age.
I was like, no. And so
That
I
sounds
get
like my daughter, my eldest daughter.
I get it, and that determinism will take her somewhere. I can tell you that now.
Yes,
Um,
yes.
but exactly like what you said, I think we've found that a lot of the parents are needing a lot more support and creating opportunities for that connection and for them to feel confident in that, because I'm not a parent coach. I'm not someone that specializes in that side of development. But the one thing that I do know is the prevention and the importance of health promotion, when it comes to developing personal skills when we're looking at these larger public health issues. So if we're looking at the numbers of eating disorders, we're looking at the numbers of sextortion reports that are going through the federal police, we're understanding, the mental health numbers and substance abuse. If we look at that and look at how we can prevent it, that's
Yeah,
what I understand.
yeah, definitely. So when you go into schools to run your workshops, how do you tackle the really difficult conversations around gender identity and the types of issues that are impacting young people? How do you actually tackle those uh, in a sensitive way that is also inclusive?
I don't directly address gender identity. I've done a lot of research around it. I understand. I've worked with one of the top gender clinics in Sydney. And I've seen a lot of research around it. I don't directly address it because everything I do is curriculum-based framework. But what we do promote is that everyone is deserving of respect and being able to accept other people's differences and being able to understand discrimination and how you can be an upstander and not a bystander, and that you being yourself is important. And so I think that from what I understand, and even just working alongside a gender and sexology clinic, is that these topics are extremely sensitive. And it's really important that, again, the foundational aspects of this is important. So again, looking at being able to be confident in who you are, being able to create safe spaces to express yourself, being able to understand that everyone is deserving of love and respect. So these are just essential life skills. And I also would say that these types of conversations, I think that people who are specifics, they are specifically in the area of gender identity or sexology or anything like that, that's what they are doing, and that's their area of research. And so I guess in a sense, I always just promote a safe place where everyone is, everyone's inclusive, everyone is deserves to be heard and respected. But because of the nature of, I guess, if we're thinking about the system, it's really important that that I leave these types of conversations to the people who are qualified to be able to navigate these.
Yeah. So when you talk about curriculum, are you talking about the respectful relationships curriculum?
So in New South Wales, our current programs are aligned with the New South Wales PDHP curriculum, which is physical health and personal development. So we do that. And then for high schools, we do life skills. And then we also, at the moment, are looking at aligning our programs with the respectful relationships curriculum. So we're currently, because I am in a startup program, we're currently just in piloting and testing. So it's just about looking at how we can do that, and then hopefully long term we can have enough reporting to be aligned with the e-safety commissioner for
Fantastic.
our wellbeing programs.
That's awesome. Well, how can people get in touch with you to find out more about changing the conversation?
Oof. So I have a website. www.changingtheconversation.com.au. I personally think following me on Instagram at Changing the Conversation with a double N is probably going to be your best hit. You can connect with me on LinkedIn, Maddie Graham, where you can learn more about the work that I'm doing in psychology, the papers I'm writing. That's also pretty cool to understand the foundational aspects of why I run these programs. I probably would say they're the best ways to get in contact with me.
Fantastic.
Perfect.
Well, I've thoroughly enjoyed listening to you talk today, and hopefully our listeners and viewers have as well. I think what you're doing is amazing, and I'm just so thrilled to have met you because you're a shining light, and I think that you're going to be really successful with your work and really supporting all of those young people that we need to support, and we want to see all of them shine as well. So hopefully together we can do some things. And I'm really excited to share your story and your work with my viewers. So
Oh,
thanks for being on the podcast today.
oh, thank you. And likewise, I think that everything that you are creating change in, especially with, engaging the parents and understanding you being a parent yourself and understanding your own experiences and understanding the hardships of experiences along the way of parenthood is something that I personally haven't experienced. And I can see that you are so connected to your mission and what you're doing. And I'm really excited I'm blessed to have met you, but I'm also really excited to see where you take this venture. And it's really cool to be involved. So thank
Me
you.
too. I'm not quite sure where it's going to go now.
Yeah, but you know
Keep
what?
going.
It will be taken somewhere, and you never know what's around the corner.
That's right. That's the exciting part of life. So, all right. Well, thanks again, and I'll be in touch with you soon. Well, I really hope you enjoyed this episode from our Circle of Support series of the podcast. If you would like further information about how to be in contact with our guest from today, please click on the links below. If you are a parent who is struggling with any of the issues we've raised in this episode, I invite you to book a call with me by clicking on the link below or scanning the QR code on the screen, so you can share with me what challenges you're experiencing, and I can share how I may be able to support you as you guide your child or children through their learning. Don't forget to like and subscribe to our Creating Connections podcast to continue to learn from myself and our guests how you can best support your child as they navigate their learning. I look forward to hearing from you and seeing you on the next episode in our Circle of Support series.